We're going to review Daf Mem Hey through Nun Alf, which is the past week, of Sanhedrin. So we talk a lot about Niskalin, the procedure for Niskalin, and then towards the end we talked about Arba Misas, Bezdin, and the order of their severity. So Daf Mem Hey, really there was Mishnah Mem Dal Beis, which talked about the procedures for stoning men and women, and whether we cover them, whether they're stolen without clothes, and Berlin Misa Yafa, we do it very quickly, and then the end of the daf is Be'ina Krad Chsiv, which is an interesting discussion. Whether psukim are literal or not. There's a whole bunch of examples which psukim are literal, which starts out with whether you need these Adam to testify in a different place or to stone him in a different place. So that's pretty much a self-contained unit of Daf Mem Hey. All right. And they'll compare it to today. This is easy. Fine. So the Mishnah. Oh, 1 second. I'm sorry. I don't know. That's the. Yeah. So the Mishnah, the machlokus here was if when you stone a woman, is she totally clothed? That's our hold, or she's not clothed except a little bit covered up. That's a Yehuda holds Neidash and Psukim. Of course, this we'll discuss later, the procedure for skila, and this is in Krad Chsiv, which is a Yedias Hashas. All right. Fine. That was the Mishnah, which you just saw the machlokas of whether whether a woman is stoned with or without clothes on, and the drushes in the gemara are pretty simple. The Rabbanan say, "Oso below ksuso, holosa b'ksuso," and one second. Right, and Rabbi Yehuda says, "Lo shna ish, lo shna isha." Fine. Then the question is the reason because of her, right? You'll have Q's and A's in the Gemara this time. If the reason because of her, then we see by Sota, we compare this to Sota, right? There's machlokas by Sota, whether they, Rabbi Yehuda says that they would not rip off the begadim. So basically the Gemara is mechalik, but that Sota is a major difference between Sota and our case. Why? Because Sota, she's going to live. If she's going to live and the Pirchei Kahuna will see her undressed, then they'll be attracted to her. So we don't want to do that. And also you could say as far the other way for the Rabbah, we want to be more severe over there. Rabbanan hold over here that we do not undress her. Over here, there by Sota, Rabbanan would say we do undress her. Why? Because you want to make a spectacle out of her. You want the nosu kaladosh. You want to give musr to all the women.
Wasn't there something that said that we didn't do that because she was already embarrassed?
Oh, so well, I guess if you I mean, I don't know.
I said that
Come in. Well, the Gemara is discussed in a second. Yeah. Then the Gemara asks a question. So over here, why don't we do both? Why don't we give her both punishments? Right, and the answer is, which we have a few times say, is we don't want to we want to give this person the best misa possible. What is that? So as machlokas, would you rather die quicker without dignity, or you rather die slower but with dignity? So if you have the clothes on, so it makes a person die slower, but they do have dignity. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, anything to cushion the fall, right? Right. So that will be the Rabbana hold is better to live longer and be embarrassed. Fine. But again, the Sota is a completely different story. Fine. Then the Mishnah says part of the procedures for the skila itself. It's 2 stories high, which together with the guy's height is 9 amos, because the guy's three amos. The guy is 3 amos high. Right, 369, right? That I don't have a picture of. What? It was 2 floors.
3.5 and 3.
No, come on.
10,
Well, the base that's good. Well, stay comas. It's
right, 2, right. Okay, that's fine.
2 floors. Wait, how much is 2 floors?
You're discussing.
Well, I was I think the floor is 3 amos. It's 3 6, and with his height, it's 9 amos. I guess we think of a floor as more, but
No,
right.
It was
Right. The Gemara says koma shalo, right? So there's 3 stories because the person's height is around 6 feet, which is 3 amos. So amos are like 2 feet approximately. So a person's height is 6 feet. So altogether, it's 12 feet high with to his head's 18 feet high. Now the Gemara's question is, with a bow, we know in Baba Kama, you need 10 tefachim to kill, right? So why do we have so much? And again, the second time on the same page, choose a nice misa, meaning it'll die quickly. And the Gemara says, so fine, so make 10 stories high, and the answer is then that minvul, that right, then it'll splatter all over. That wouldn't be very kind. Right, that was my question, Baal Batish. Since I'm Baal Batish, I have a question. 12 feet, a person who falls from 12 feet is not.
It's 18.
It's 6 amos, plus he's standing on 6 amos. 6 amos is 12 feet. Right, I think that's what it seems.
6 feet tall is not a story. Right.
I think it was, yeah.
6 feet?
I think so, yeah.
Moshe Rabbeinu was almost tall.
That Moshe Rabbeinu, right?
Who's in the house?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what the figure I remember. I don't see it anywhere specifically. Yeah. Well, so someone asked that question that you don't get the person doesn't get injured. So they said that they drug him up before, right?
Yeah.
So since not drug him, they give him
Right.
So when the person's right, so I think part of it is that whoever says, I said, when you fall from 12 feet, if you catch yourself, it's less of a fall. If a person falls from 12 feet, they're catching themselves on the way down. Right. If a person's drunk and totally out of it and they're literally falling down, then there'll be much more of an impact. All right, I don't know. Fine. That's true, right. There was also the stone, right? That's another point. There was also the stone that was thrown down. Fine. So the stone was very big. There was one stone which was dedicated for this purpose. Obviously, afterwards they buried it with the guy, but they set it aside before just to have. I think also it's a part of the deterrent of skila is like you're going to be stoned, and we even have a stone ready to push on you. That huge stone, 2 people had to pick it up, but then one guy.
Also, the guy just fell and he's like riding around in pain.
Right.
But don't start looking for a rock.
Right. It has to be. The whole thing was very quick. I mean, it was supposed to be very quick. Right. So it was a huge rock that 2 people had to pick up. One person pushed it off, and everything that was involved in this, and including the tree which he's hanged on for a second afterwards, which we'll get to next daf, that was also buried with him. Which Shmuel says that if the hand of the Edom was chopped off, Amar Shmuel, it's big enough, yeah. Shmuel said if the Edom's hand was chopped off, then they can't stone him. Why? Because it says Yad Ha'edom Tiyeh Bo B'Rishon. So the hand, they have to have hands, right? And also if they go to a different place and they say we testify about this guy that he was Mechuyev Skila, they have to be the same Edom, right? Because Shmuel holds, but in Krat Chasiv, which means a pasuk has to be literal. It says the hands of Edom will be on him. The hands of Edom have to be on him. So the Gemara says, do we say this? So we have 2 examples. One second. I didn't make this bigger. I know, but I don't mind that song. Here we go. Shmuel says you need the same Edim, and they have to have hands. Now there's two exceptions, and of course we hold shnei ksubon ka'echad ein malamdim, right? If there's two exceptions to the rule, then those cases are the exceptions, right? Whatever the lumdus is, it's a rule in drasha. So one exception is if you can't kill the guy with stoning, let's say he gets up and runs away, then you could shoot him, right? So that's not being literal. The pasuk says the guy has to be stoned. Also, if the guy doesn't have Goel Hadam, right? The guy was 80-year-old guy, and there's no relative to avenge his blood. So the killer, you would think, doesn't have to run to go. So Bezin has a stand in Goel Hadam to threaten the guy. What? A chaser, right? To chase him back to the Arim Mikkel. So those two are not literal because he's not Goel Hadam. So that shades the two other cases Gemara brings Ben Sor and Mora. One of the reasons Ben Sor and Mora doesn't happen is because it has to be very specific things. The parents have to have the tasub of given so they have to walk well and they have to talk well and they have to see him blame suman and they have to have similar voices so those are also very specific, very literal, but that's because there's Kra Yisera. The Gemara says that's an exception to Shmuel's rule being of that wouldn't show that being because that's because it's extra pasuk. And also in the Dachas, which we discussed, I think, earlier in this Masechta, has to have a street, right? Why does it have a street? Because the pasuk says you have to have a street, which is also very literal. Fine. But again, that's because there's extra words in that pasuk, not because of Shmuel's rule. But Shmuel himself would still hold the rule that every pasuk is very literal. Okay. So now there's another machlokas. Go back to slides for a second. See? They are. Okay, this is that 46. So who gets hanged? I'm sorry. There was one shear and a different shear, and the guy was saying hung the whole time. It bothered me a lot. He kept saying hung. Whatever. Hanged. No, but hanged is a person. Whatever. I think.
Kind of a person that was hung?
No.
Right?
I think it's hanged.
Okay.
I think. Anyway, whatever. Hung. It's part of it. Anyway.
Traffic.
Anyway, mean this way. So who gets hanged, right? So the either it's Megadif, and Rabbi Loza says call the skull. Anyone who gets stoned. Right before the Mishnah on Daf Menvav, we'll see a small piece, which is Bezin has permission to hit anyone they want, to take the law into their own hands, except if assuming you have the liberty to do that in the country you're living in. Then we go into the stoning procedure, hang the body. We take it down quick. He kills Kimtoli and the Shechina's pain. And then we get into a discussion of Kavura is Mishum Bizyona or Mishum Kapara. And if there's Spadim for the seats of the livers. There's two machloks and very similar, which brings us really onto Mem Zayin. The start of Mem Zayin has all kinds of proofs. If there's Spadim are for the deceased of the living. And the Gemara ends up in the middle of Mem Zayin. That's for the honor of the deceased, I believe. So just to go for the slides still, the Machlokes are Chachamim and Reb Elazar, right? So Chachamim say, V'humas v'talisa, Klal Uprat, V'humas v'talisa, anyone who gets killed is hanged, fine, whatever. Ki killas is the prat. So, and we said they're a little further away from each other than usual because it's Pasuk Chav Beis and Pasuk Chav Gimel, as you see. So we include a Mekal and over the Vodazar. Like Ki killas Elkim would just be a Mekalo, but we were a little more inclusive. Prat and Klal is not so inclusive in general. It's more limited as opposed to Ribu Yamiyat. Ribu Yamiyat is more inclusive. Prat and Klal, usually, like we say, some people say every morning, Aim Prat and Machshav Klal. Aim Klal Machshav Prat, right? So here, Killas is the Prat, so it should be all the Mekal. Since one's in Pasuk Chav Beis, one's in Pasuk Chav Gimel, then we include also over the Vodazar. But all these fellas on the side, the Saif and Sreifa, which we'll talk about later, those are killed, but you don't hang them. Elazar says humus v'talisa is a riboy, same words. Kikelas is a miut, and we include all in the skull. All people who get stoned get hanged for a minute, and of course these people are also still on the side. They're for sure not included. No one would say that you hang people who are killed with other misas, which is good that you don't hang a person who died beherek with sayaf. But anyway. Oh, you're right. Good point. Good point.
Hangings are done by hand.
Right. That's Mishnah says it. Right. You're right. So you could kill. Right.
I mean, it's only for a split second.
Right. It's only for a second. One guy
So,
ties it.
then
Right.
Exactly what point.
I don't know. I don't think the Gemara says what the point is, but that's what the pasuk says. Fine. So here's the Gemara on the end of the base that machlokas. And Hashim Rach Miyadadi, like we said, because they're distant from each other, then we could include more things. Fine. And 1 second. Now there was another machlokas. Also loksuso runs at ishvul isha. Fine. Now the question is, the Mishnah had said, just going back to the Mishnah, the Chacham and the Mishnah say Eina Isha Nitless, right? Before we're talking about stoning, who's wearing the clothing, that's the last Mishnah. This Mishnah is talking about who gets hanged. Hung, fine. Right? So the Chacham say that a woman does not get hung b'chlal. All right? And the Rebbe says they do, and the Gemara brings Joshes. The last thing the Mishnah says, Ein Danim Shnaim Yom Echad. You don't judge two people on one day, which you saw. That's where we bring Shemba to Shadach in a second, right? Right. Last week, well, what did we last week? 80 people. 1 second. So that makar for whether we hang a woman or not is this is the drasha. Rabbanan say ishvul isha, right? Salisa also al ha'etz. The pasuk says. So Rabbi Lazadash is also bloksuso that they're without clothing. And Rabbanan say ishvul isha, that woman is not hanged with cloth. And the Gemara says, as far as ein dan shnai yom echad misa achas avera achas danin, that if it's one avera and everyone who did the avera gets the same type of misa as opposed to Basco and all this lovely stuff from later, then we cannot judge them. If it's one misa and one avera, then you could judge it in one day. And Rashi points out the shmona nashim lava avera achas hayu. Right, the Mishnah points out Shem and Shetach was an exception to this rule. So you would think, what do you mean? But they're all doing kishuf, so it's all misa achas v'erachas. So the Gemara is machadish that no, some were over, some were yudoni, and over yudoni is different punishments. So that's why the Mishnah points out usually Shem and Shetach wouldn't be allowed to judge them the same day, but here he did. Fine. And Rabbi Elazar Yaakov says, like we said before, Bezin Machim Onshin, Lasos Torah, where they see appropriate, then they can give punishments and even give malchus to get people back in line. Fine. The Mishnah is again, like we said, the procedures of hanging someone, and they put the beam either in the ground, or they just lean it against the building to make it as quick as possible. And you can't leave the guy over at night. And the Gemara goes through this whole thing. So the Gemara says just bit by bit. I'm not sure why this is. Mashin also that we don't finish the Gemara din. I guess we want to be from his death until the burial should be right away. There's two things. In other words, we don't want to hang him more than a second because of Kilas Elokim, because that is a Chil Hashem. But also, we want to bury him as soon as possible. So Rashi says, so we don't say chayav, we don't give the gemara until shkias achama. Then we put him on echa kosher, echa matrik. The chaim says tliya, just be yotzei in the mitzvah. Right? Over here is one case where you want to be yotzei. And that's the reason also not to put the wood in the ground just to lean it, because you want to bury it. This is a famous Rashi. Yeah. Yeah, it gets buried with him.
Bury the word.
Yeah. So right, that Rashi brings in the Chumash that since we are in the Musaf Hashem, so whatever that means, that we look like Hashem. So it's a mashal to a king who had a brother, and his brother got hanged, and everyone saw it, said, "Oh, the king was killed." So that's not a good thing for the king. So we take him down. So, and like we said in the Mishnah, Hashem is very sensitive to everyone's bizayon, even to the Risham, for Kolshkin to Tzadikim. The Gemara goes through a whole business about trying to find out the source of Kavura and the Torah, if there's such a thing. In every case, the Gemara says, no, that was a minhag, right? Avram buried Sarah, that was a minhag. That was a minhag in that day. Hashem buried Moshe, that was the minhag. And Kavar Sikhuran would be a good source, probably. But again, it seems like that's a remes. So now here's two questions. Kavura Mishum Biziona or Kapor or Mishum Kaparahu. What's the nafkamina is if he says, I don't want to be buried, right? So is that his choice or not? And a similar question is a hesped because of his covenant, the yakar d'chayev, the covenant of people who are living, or the covenant of the deceased. The nafkamina has two things. Number one, if he says, I don't want a hesped, so if it's for the covenant of the living, he has no choice. And the other thing is Afukim Yoshim, right? If we can spend the money from the Yoshim, from the Yerusha, if it's something that's for the deceased, then we can spend the money from the Yerusha. If it's for the survivors, for the family, then they can say, I'm not spending money on this. And again, the Gemara brings lots of rayas, and each raya could push off, basically saying that it was covered for, whichever way you say it, was covered for the dead, that the living got covered, or the living wanted, you could push off the rayas either way. Or that person wanted the living to have covered, like they did based on that person, but it was for the living to have covered. And the Gemara ends off, Siman Yafa Lameis Shenefrom Mela Chamisa. So the Gemara says it happens to be, let's say a person has a funeral where it was raining, right? Nisbal from Nikfar, let's say he didn't have or there was a wild animal, or it was a downpour. So we see the whole thing is for the benefit of the dead person. Rashi says, why do you lie? Right? In other words, we're doing it for the dead person, so these are alternative ways of getting kapara. This bizion this a person has. Huh? The better, right? So even though he didn't have a traditional funeral burial, still he got a kapara anyway. All right. So we said that the niskal is not buried in his family plot. Why? So we said you don't bury Russia Eitzel Tzaddik. And we have a story with Elisha, a person who was in Russia, was rolled in. They were burying him and they had to run away. So he sort of rolled into Elisha's kever and his bones touched Elisha. Elisha woke up from the dead and he threw him out of there for a second. He woke up for a minute to throw him out. And the guy, I think, also came alive for a second to be thrown out.
The guy ran out.
Oh, he ran away?
No.
Well, that means he got alive. Right, that's it, right.
The question is whether this was one of the two.
Right, so this, right. The other one was, right. But, right, I think Elisha, both of them got up then. Elisha basically had to throw him out.
Because Eliyahu did one, but Elisha did two.
Right.
The question was whether the person that quote unquote got up was considered one of the two.
Right, and we had the discussion also, he only was machai him for a minute, enough to get him to move out of the camera to, go be buried somewhere else, not here. Right, fine. So there's different levels of Rasham, and we bury each level separately. The question is, they should have 4 different plots for the different levels of people, whoever's more severe, but the different levels of severity, clearly, as the Gemara says later on, Daf Nun. And the answer is Steak Bros Margamila. This Kabbalah Halach Moshe Sinai. That we have two. That there's only two plots. So it's this Kalman Strafin and Nechnakim Nerogin. Right? Skills Reifa has one plot, and Harry Mechanik has another plot. Right. And I imagine, I imagine they weren't used so much because supposedly doesn't kill so much. Right. So the Gemara, this leads into a oh, he didn't show the slides for this stuff. Let's go back to the slides a second. Most of the language on slides is courtesy of Zichru. Zichru.com. Oh, where do we go? Huh? No, that slides, no, the title slides for each daf are from Zichru. Here we go. Daf 47. Okay, that we just did in Kov Moshe Tzaddik. I wrote that. That's not from Zichru. Dichur, which we'll get to in a second. And then if Rosh obtains a kapara through his death or after burial, it's very hard to add a spacing.
There you go.
No. See, it doesn't work. And then fine. And the karka of a grave, which leads also, the Gemara tells a separate story. It's not connected really, where they were taking the dirt from a certain person's grave, I think Rav's grave, because it had medicinal purposes, and like, well, what's going on with that? That's his karka olam, but that also that leads to a question: if the karka of the grave, other parts of the grave, is forbidden hana or not?
Sit it down on the table.
Huh? Correct. Right.
Through showing people here are Zayson.
Right.
Kept saying, sleep,
Oh, he's apologizing. Right. Oh, he's putting his hand in it. Fine. So basically, the way this is connected to the Mishnah is that even though they're getting a kapara after the death, right? Then the question is, could he be buried in the family plot? Right? Really, that's jumping on a basil. The Gemara is a little right. The Gemara says that you would not bury him in his kibbutz avosov. So the question is, if the death itself is a kapara, right? There's three choices for this guy to have a kapara. It could be the death, it could be the burial, or it could be this achla equal basar, which the Gemara says over here. The Gemara ends up that the Gemara suggests that might be that a person needs all three to be a kapara. So that's why he can't be buried in his family plot, just because at that point when he's being buried, he only had the burial. He didn't have only it was dead. He didn't have the burial. Right, after the equal basar, right, after his body is deteriorated, then you could move him because that's past those three things. He died, he's buried, and he got the equal basar. But the Gemara before had a discussion of dichui. The question is, no, because this guy for a moment was not right. The Gemara brings a case. The reason the Gemara brings a case is to bring a riot from our case. Right? Because when the Gemara thought you need just dying to have a kapara, the Gemara says once he died, that he could go back to his family plot. That was the Gemara's riot on the base. But the two similar cases of when he ate chalev and he was mafish korban and he went off the derech and then he did shuv, right? So since he's not from, then he can't bring a korban. That's a halacha of korban. So the question is, but now he's better. Now he's chazer bo, but it says no. Once it was pushed off, it was pushed off. And the same thing with a what's the other case? Was nashtata, right? A person became temporarily insane, which does not apply to sleeping, according to most people, which doesn't, right? Because you don't have to be awake when the coin's being carved for you. But the person was nashtata, so nashtata in one sense was not intentional, but on the other hand, there's no way to come out of it. That's why it's different than becoming not from. Becoming not from You did it intentionally, which should be worse. But on the other hand, you could snap out of it if you decide. Right. So the svarus, that's the tzrichas. So really, that's saying what tzrichas in Gemara. There's a tzrichas each way. That the shtat that you slipped in, obviously against your better judgment. He didn't have control of it. But you won't necessarily come out of it. You can't come out of it by yourself. Right. Fine. And as we said before, so the Gemara's maskana is that no, our case is not a case of dichui, because even after he's dead, he's not roy for burial until the equal basar. Fine. And this is huh? No, because we thought just dying is enough for a kapara. So then why don't you go bury him with the family because he's roy again? So I mean, to us, it's a little. I don't think we appreciate the severity of people being buried in the wrong place, right? Like the story with the people who went Shomer Shabbos, right? So they wanted to be buried next to the Shomer Shabbos. So the Rav, whoever is, said to them, "What do you mean?" But then they go come to Shemaim and they have a time of the guy next to you Shomer Shabbos. He wanted to be buried. I'm just chazing over the story. You know the story? There was a community which was not Shomer Shabbos, and the Rav said, "You guys will be buried elsewhere," and they're like, "That's not right. You hate us." And so the Rav said, "No, because when you come to Shemaim, if you're buried next to Shomer Shabbos, they'll say, 'Look, why aren't you like your buddy who's Shomer Shabbos? So it's better for you go in the other side of the cemetery where people like you are, and it will be better for you." Fine. Right. I think they do bring it in this respect. No, well, that's outside the question. Right. It sounds very familiar in this context. Fine. Yes, they were taking dirt from this kever. And this leads to the discussion of Hazman Milsa, Hazman Alav Milsa. So in the dirt itself, they were allowed to take dirt from this kever because it's Karka Olam. But the Gemara has a number of cases. Rabbi says Hazman Milsa, Rabbi says Hazman Alav Milsa, which continues on to Daf Mem Ches, and I have little numbers here because basically Daf Mem Ches will go through is a bunch of proofs whether Hazman Milsa or Hazman Alav Milsa. Meaning, if you dedicate something and set it aside for a specific purpose but never use it, is it called something that's set aside for that purpose, halachically? Or until you actually use it, you could change your mind and say, "Nah, just kidding." So bias is Hazman Milsa, which means just setting it aside and thinking about it or saying it is enough. Rava says Hazman Alav Milsa. Let's go. So we're definitely, I believe so. Yes, it's something which ordinarily wouldn't be muktzah. Daf Mem Ches proof of Hazman Milsa is actually 9 proofs on Amud Beis on machlokas having to do with Hazman Milsa about the hides of the tefillin if they have to be tan l'shma, and separately from that, who receives the property of those executed by the king, which leads into Daf Mem Tes, the whole story about Yoav and Avner and Amasa, huh? Yeah, we'll have it soon. Fine. So Hazman Milsa is a concept in Shas. The first case that Gemara brings is right. There's for by Zav or Anida, anything she wears is a Rishon Latuma. So this is just a cool illustration. This is a Mishkav, which she's sitting on, even if it's all Avatumas, and this is a Rishon Latuma. The Gemara's case is totally different. The reason the Gemara brings is just to say, let's say you gave a kippah, which I'm not sure what that is. If you gave it to someone to make it into something else, from the time you gave it to the person doing the work, the tailor, then it doesn't have the din of her thing anymore, and automatically the tumah goes off. Really, it's the same thing. Just you gave it into the tailor, so that would be Hazman Milsa. Anyway, so this daf Mamches has many rayas. So just to go through them, and each time the Gemara has a dichoy where that shouldn't be a raya. That's not necessarily a raya. So that was the case we just saw. Kibush with Midros. No, so Sapper, you gave it to the tailor to work out. Tahar in the Midros. So it's Tahar right when you gave it to him. And the Gemara says, no, maybe it's when you already start working. Fine. And the Gemara brings, we'll get back to a tefillin bag later, but the Gemara brings it first here. The Gemara also brings on a base. If you have a tefillin bag and use it for other things, you can't put money in it. And unlike the guy who puts money in his son's tefillin bag, and he told his kid, I'll pay you if you put on tefillin, and the kid kept asking for the money. He's like, put on tefillin, because he would have found the money hiding in his tefillin bag. Fine. The Gemara brings another raya from Nefesh, which is a matzeva. Nefesh is matzeva, right? Yeah. And the Gemara's next raya is if a person gives digs a cavern for his father, but it was never used, could it be used for something else? And the Gemara says no, Mishum Kavod Aviv. Then he Mishum Kavod Aviv, he still can't use it for anything else. Kaver Chodesh, the Gemara brings a raya from Moter Bano, but if you put a nefel, it's also Bahana. So that would be a raya the other way that you have to actually use it. And the Gemara says no, really, maybe has Manamil saying you don't have to use it, but we're just saying a chiddush that a nefel is something which is matame. This is an interesting thing. If you collected money for dead people, you use it for another use or not. The Gemara has a whole tzrichs over here, and that depends. The Gemara says that if you collect it, and it also makes a difference if you collect it stam for Meisei Mitzvah or l'shem Meis Ploni. Then 1 second. Right, so I guess if you collected it, how's it work? If you collect l'shem Meis Ploni, then you wouldn't be allowed to use it for anything else. Right, Rashi says, we see Hazmana Lav Milsahi, because it could be theoretically, if you collect it for this mace, you have to use it for the mace, right? That's what those pictures of the mausoleums were like. Mausoleum, sorry. Right, if you collect l'shem mace and you can't use it for anything else, it's dedicated for that mace, that you have to spend it somehow on the mace, even though he totally doesn't need it. This next raya is if this is an interesting case. If a person was, if the father and the mother were throwing kalim, their kid died, and they were just because they're tired throwing out kalim, then other people should grab the kalim away. And we said no, that's really they didn't need to throw them away. It's just because of their trauma at that time. Then Gemara's being said no.
Right, one of them throwing the kalim. Like what's the?
I would think right. If it Rashi says the Emilsa, he like Hatzal. They threw it on their deceased son, it should stay there.
Oh, they threw. Oh, okay.
The Hazmana to be dedicated to the mace, right? And then I'm saying no. Fine. And also a kiss film, like we said, also to put in money. And the deal is no. If you put in money, it's not. And the same thing we can always push off. If you told the Uman, make me a bag, a cover for a sefer, then that's where the Gemara concedes, so to speak. That's Machok's Tana. Also with the bottom of the film. Right? If you hold as Ma'alav Milsa, then you know the evil Shema. You know, it's an interesting thing, but if you're working on this film and you're making this film, that's like Hazman. That's the Hazman. So it's a little different concept over here, but Hazman and Milsa means that the making of the bottom is important. It's a little different than dedication. But that's where the Gemara brings Machokas about if you need evil Shema, it means Hazman and Milsa. Fine. Okay, Haruge Malchus. Nechsein Lamelech. Harogei Bezdin Nechsein Liyarshim. So Bezdin is not going to take the money from the people they killed. A king, a Jewish king, who has someone killed, is going to take the money. The proof is that Achav killed Novus because he wanted his field. So he killed him because he was more of a Malchus, but that's how he got his field, because he was a Rugi Malch. The answer is no, he was related to him. He was his son's whatever. He was related somehow. The Gemara goes on to talk about Achav, that another proof, this is how we get the story of Yoav, that Yoav was taking sanctuary in the base of Mikdash, in the sanctuary. And the Gemara thinks that the reason he did that, he said, I'm going to die here. I'll die in the base of Mikdash rather than leave and be killed by a king, right? The base of Mikdash was the sanctuary. They couldn't, so he said, if I leave, the king's going to kill me. And the Gemara assumes that's because he wanted his Yarshim to get his property. And if he went out, the king would get his property. And the answer is he was just buying time. Really, he was just trying to delay them and send them back and forth to ask different shilas, which we see was also Tam Chacham. Tess. Enough we'll have time for the no, but whatever. We'll see. Maybe we'll have to clarify no for next week. Okay, so Daf Mem Tess is Yoav trial why he killed Avner Amasa, why is more Malchus, why Avner himself was killed, and then Daf Mem Tess Beis is the exciting skill so you've heard Chenek, is that mission particular a lot, and Mem Tess itself just goes through different cases, Chalitza, the big day Kohen Gadol, which are or not in a particular order. And then Daf Nun starts the fun part. So here, let's see if I can make it around the circle. Okay, Yoav killed Avner, right? Why? Because Asol was Yoav's brother. Avner killed Asol, right? Now, the discussion was, did Asol have to kill? Did Avner have to kill Asol or just wound him? So that was a discussion. Avner apparently was a very precise, not shooter, but marksman. Well, yeah, okay. And he hit him exactly in the fifth rib, so that was the tie in the back. And then, of course, this is for Amar Beis, the Machlokas, Skilo Seif Hag Mechanik, which is the popular Chum's opinion, or a Streif Skilo Hag Mechanik is Reb Shimon's order. So that's Daf Mem Tes. Very exciting. Wait, where are we? Oh, back in the Gemara. I'm not back in the Gemara. It's not fair.
Did you have 3 cases for
Huh?
you killed 3 people?
Who? I don't know. I don't know why the Gemara's not on my screen. Oh, there we go. Okay. No, my screen was showing the slide still.
Right.
Fine. So the trial of Yoav, right? I wrote notes myself on the slide. Yoav killed Avner to avenge the death of his brother Asol, like we just said in that circle. Avner killed Asol. The question was, did Avner have to kill him? Or he could have just wounded him. Fine. And he killed Amasa. Amasa was more of a Malchus because he didn't listen to David to kill Sheva ben Bichri. The reason he didn't listen is because Sheva ben Bichri was busy learning, and it's interesting, but if you're learning, then no one can interrupt you. It sounds like even if you're more of a Malchus, you're still not supposed to interrupt the guy's learning. So Amasa knew he's to be more of a Malchus, but it didn't matter. I think Gemara ends off that Avner, Yoav himself, right? Yeah. By Yikar Midbar, so we see he was a big Talmud Chacham. His house is like Midbar. He was like a Midbar that's open to everyone, or it was clean from Gaz and Arias. The house of Yoav was clean from Gaz and Arias. So we think of him as a bad guy, but really he was a tzaddik, which a lot of people who were generals, they were big tzaddikim. Fine, and here is the Mishnah of Avnei Bezdin. Skilo Sefer Mechanik. The order here is specific. Rav Papa says the order is specific from the fact that Rav Shimon says a different order, right? So Avnei Bezdin Skilo Sefer Mechanik. Rav Shimon gives different orders. Obviously, the order is particular. There's other cases where the order is particular. There's a potion of 7 sammanim you're supposed to use to see if a kesem is from a nida or otherwise. That's particular, but Other things the Gemara brings, Mrs. Chalitza, Yapach Lesson Ba. The order that apparently the Kohen has to put on, he has to put on Mechasayim first, but the Torah lists in a different order. Okay, so now we're Daf Nun. So basically, Daf Nun is going to point out this. We know this yesterday's Daf is pointing out the chumrah of each one. Maybe we'll really save enough for next time, yes, to go through to do it justice. The Daf Nun, where are we? Where'd it go? There we are. I'll have to get back to the slides. Okay. All right, Daf 50. First, Malchokas, Rav Shimon Skil versus Shrefa, some Malchokas, Chenek versus Saif, right? And then Travis says what's going for adultery. All right, so we'll go through these slides as best I can, and anyone can tell me where I'm making a mistake. I think for this, just because I go through the slides. Right. So the Gemara basically has a chumrah of each thing. Skil is more chum than Saif. And skil is basically the most chum because it's post shiab ikras. Anything you're gonna say, you say, guys, kof b'ikr. That trumps everything, right? Kof b'ikr, finish. Saif fine is the irtin dachas kimon avad. And skil is chum mechanik again. Post shiab ikr. That's all you gotta know. Chenek has a chumrah that's hukush kol makom that chenek can give to a person who's mak of imo. So that's its own little chumrah. And this is Sreifa. You have to justify Sreifa is second down on the list. Sreifa is given to Bas Kohen, Koshi's Machal Aviyah, and again, Saif is given the Dachas, which has its own chumrah. Fine. Sreifa is Chum Mechenek. Again, the same Cheshbon, Kosh Machal Aviyah. Saif is Chum Mechenek. Once Saif is Chum Skilo, Seva Herg Mechenek. Right. All right. This is basically Machlokas Tan Karav Shem. The Machlokas. There we go. Right. So the Basko and Arusa. Well, the Tanakama holds that skill is more chomer, the most chomer, which is interesting. Right. The Hanoch of the Gemara is that Arusa is the most chomer thing. Why? Because you're doing three bad things, right? So Arusa is the most chomer. Once Arusa is the most chomer, from that we can learn out different things. That's the starting point. Starting point is no matter what, Arusa is most chomer, and of course Bas Kohen is more chomer than Bas Yisrael. Everyone would agree to that. So here we have skila more than Sreifa. So that's why it's the most chomer, straight out. You can also prove skila is more chomer than Chenek, because we know Arusa is more chomer than the Sur. Reb Shimon conveniently holds that she gets Sreifa also, so it's on the same level. But according to Shimon, you go along the bottom, that Sreifa is more common than skill. Why? Because Bas Kohen is more common than Bas Yisrael. So that's how he would see. And then the Gemara goes through on all base, all the same cheshbonos, according to Shimon, with Sreifa on the top of skill. And that's, I think, basically it for Daf Nun. Daf Now for today's Daf, which maybe we can go through next time.